My path to leadership positions started really with the military. Somehow, some way, the S3, the major, found out that I was a gunnery expert. He tabbed me to be his battalion fire direction officer that controlled the fires of all the other batteries. I was controlling the fires of 3 batteries of 8-inch howitzers at 20 years old. I went to Pacific Coast School of Banking, which is considered a graduate school of banking. One of the things that was grating on me at that time was such poor leadership in the high echelons of banking. I just felt that there was something very lacking. So I wrote my thesis entitled An Answer to Faulty Leadership in Banking. And I felt that being a faith-based man, taking my faith into the marketplace doesn't really work. So I talk about, you have the transmitter and you have the receiver. And the transmitter is communicating to the receiver. Now, if the receiver gets it and they do this thing and they come back and the transmitter says, no, that's not what I said. They go, well, it's the fault of the transmitter because they didn't communicate concisely to make this person understand.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Building Up, the podcast where we talk about professional and personal growth. I'm your host, Luke Woolsey, and today we have an extra special episode because I have the honor of interviewing someone who has had a huge impact on my life, my dad, Greg Woolsey. He is a Vietnam vet, spent over 30 years in the banking industry, and today we're going to talk to him about the lessons he's learned in leadership along the way. Let's dive in. Hi, Dad.
Hey, son, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Good.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about leadership and some of your experience with various roles that you've had. Yeah. And just kind of as an overview, what is your experience with leadership? Just what type of roles have you occupied?
Well, I would like, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of step back. And,
sure.
And my path to leadership positions started really with the military. And after high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Most high school graduates don't.
Right.
And I graduated in 1966, and right then the Vietnam War was in full swing. And so I asked my older brother, I was thinking about the service. I come from an Army family, as you know.
Yeah.
And your granddad is a full colonel, and your Uncle Tom is West Point graduate, and then Ray was an officer in the military police. So I asked my older brother that, I said, well, if I go in the service, what should I do? And he says, well, I recommend that you volunteer, because if you wait to be drafted, even though it's only a 2-year enlistment, they're going to put you in the infantry, and you'll be sent over to Vietnam post-haste. So he says, if you enlist, it's a 3-year commitment, but you get to choose your military occupation. And he recommended that I go airborne artillery, which I did. So I went in the military in October of 66, and advanced individual training at Fort Sill, and then I went to jump school in Benning in 67 and was assigned to Fort Bragg as an enlisted person attached to an artillery battery or a battalion. And I found out very quickly that being an enlisted man was a different kind of duty. And I thought, I wonder if I should try for this OCS. So I tried. I barely made the grade to get in. And so I got into officer candidate school at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And 6 months later, graduated and was commissioned a second lieutenant at 19
Wow.
years of age.
That's young, right, for an officer?
Oh, very young. Matter of fact, my class was the last class that they allowed high school graduates. You had to have at least minimum of 2 years college after that.
Okay.
So I was very fortunate. And so when I graduated, I flew home on leave and I married your mom.
Okay.
And I took her to a desert called Fort Irwin, which is right by Barstow.
Mm-hmm.
Army has a sense of humor. You train for jungle warfare in the desert.
Oh, that's funny.
So anyway, I was there a year, and then I got my orders to go to Vietnam. And in Vietnam, I was assigned to an artillery battalion that was very close to the DMZ, North Vietnam, and somehow, some way, the S3, the major, found out that I was a gunnery expert, and he tabbed me to be his battalion fire direction officer that controlled the fires of all the other batteries. So I was controlling the fires of 3 batteries of 8-inch howitzers at 20 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, this is the year 1969.
Is there a direct count of how many guys you're overseeing?
Well, it's called the FDC, the Fire Direction Center, and we had shifts. We had the night shift and the day shift. I was the night shift. I came on station at like 10:30 p.m. and got off at 11:30 a.m. So it was around 13 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And those lapse times were for debriefing, for fire missions and all that sort of thing. But the activity was a lot at night, as you can imagine. So I served in that capacity for 9 to 10 months. And then 2 months later, I rotated out back to the States. And I decided to get out of the service and go to college back in Santa Barbara. So I went to college at Santa Barbara City College for 2 years and then transferred down here to San Diego State. That's how we got to San Diego. So when I got out of the service, I was thinking, well, I would know what I wanted to do after college.
Yeah.
So I came down here, started majoring in engineering, and I thought, man, these guys are eating my lunch. So I switched over to business, and I found it very attractive. And so I ended up graduating in a degree in real estate. And I actually started to work for a realtor when I graduated. And that didn't work out. I did that for about 3 or 4 months, and I thought, I'm really kind of leaning toward finance. I wonder what the banking industry is about. So around that time, I joined Wells Fargo Bank in 1974. Now, as far as leadership goes, I observed leadership in the ranks of the military. And what I found was most of the leadership was top down. You obey, you submit, don't ask questions. Yours is just to accomplish the mission and just do it. I had one great officer who oversaw me, and he taught me a lot. He mentored me. He cared about me. He was knowledgeable, and I'd follow him anywhere. And with good leadership, you bust your pick trying to please them.
Sure.
So that was my first go-around with leadership. But then in the banking world, that's a different deal.
It's a whole different animal. The business world, is it because it was the civilian world, or because leadership's pretty easy to identify in military? Doesn't make them a good one, but you're just the rank kind of sets that up, right?
Right, correct. Yes, it is a different animal. And at this time in my life, I became a Christian, and my worldview changed. In the secular world, leadership is just getting things done through other people and browbeating them and looking at them and valuing them just for their utility. And whereas the Christian worldview is you care for the individual, but you still need to get things done, but you have to edify, and motivate them, teach them, and be patient. Treat them as redeemable. So when you confront somebody, you're not adversarial. You're confronting them to restore the relationship.
Right.
And whereas top-down leadership doesn't do that. It's more punitive.
Well, backing up to the Army, was there a reason why you chose that particular branch of the service?
Well, in the Army, there's what they call combat arms. That's armor, infantry, artillery, and I forget there's another one. And the rest are just support groups like quartermaster, signal, and so forth. So I wanted to be in combat arms.
Right.
And my older brother was in artillery, and that sounded pretty good to me. And I later found out that the artillery is considered the king of battle, and the infantry is considered the queen of battle. So, but anyway, we fired in support of the infantry, and you really make a difference helping each other out.
Yeah, I bet. And you said you graduated OCS as
1968.
as a second lieutenant.
Yeah.
Is that what you were when you left the Army?
No, I was promoted to a first lieutenant. And had I stayed in, if I had volunteered to stay in another 6 months in Vietnam, I would have been promoted to a captain.
But you would have had to stay in Vietnam.
I would have had to stay in Vietnam.
Ooh.
No. The answer was no. I didn't want to do that. And my expertise typically was in gunnery. I was really, really good in that. And so being in a captain's role, I would have been a battery commander. And I think I was probably too immature to be a commander at that point.
Yeah. Had you led anything before
No.
going? I mean,
No.
yeah.
Well, matter of fact, the funny thing is, so going back to my enlistment, you go down to L.A. and you go through the physical and the cough and injections. And then you get on the bus to go to Fort Ord for basic. And one of the sergeants looked at me, and I don't know why I stood out to him, but he goes, "You're in charge of this bus." And I go, "Oh, brother." And all these guys, long hair, and, just rowdy. So we get on the bus. I'm trying to organize them, quiet them down. So we get off the bus at Fort Ord, and we get our haircuts and our fatigues, and, we become, we take care of take off all our civilian identity and become, lookalikes.
Yeah.
And so while at that replacement center, another sergeant came up to me and he says, "You know what? I'm going to make you platoon guide." I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, you're going to be in charge of all these guys." And I said, "Oh, boy." Well, I learned in that 60-day training, was it 60 days, 90 days? Anyway, I learned that leadership had a cost. People were always mad at you,
Yeah, you noticed that early on.
Oh, gosh, yeah. You tell them what to do, and they go, "Who are you?" That sort of thing. So then when I went to when I went to advanced individual training at Fort Sill, they wanted to do the same thing. They looked at me and they go, "I want you to be the platoon guide." I go, "No."
That's interesting that you were kind of pegged.
Yeah. So I said, "No, I'll be a squad leader." They go, "Oh, okay." So because I didn't want to have all that pressure. So I guess I was identified as a leader
Yeah.
by various individuals.
So you get identified. Do you start to kind of shape a leadership style? Do you are there things that are helping you kind of shape how you want to lead?
Well, it was, I think, that I needed in my life a mentor or somebody that I could look up to that would exemplify as an example of good leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have that up until that time. I just had people screaming at me, yelling at me.
Yeah.
And so I thought that's what leadership was. You're in charge. They have to do what you're going to, what they tell you to do. So it wasn't until later on that I started picking up incidences of or examples of good leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I observed battalion commanders, I observed company commanders, and I started taking little pieces of each one of them that I thought that I could make my own.
Yeah.
And
So you made them your own. Also, in the service during your time in Vietnam, or
well, I really was in charge of the FTC staff, which was probably 12 individuals. And that was one shift, and of course, I could be in charge of the other shift as well. So maybe 12 to 24 individuals at one time.
mm-hmm.
Since it was battalion level, we had more people.
Mm-hmm.
But that was about it. Now, if you became a battery commander, you were in charge of like 120 people.
Oh man.
Oh yeah.
So then, do you take some of those skills with you outside of the service then, or do any of those continue to serve you in any way?
Well, it was interesting that you mentioned that. I was thinking about that, and so I get into the banking field.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the military at that time was all male, and when I was in Vietnam, all I saw was olive drab uniforms, boots, mud, the smell of cordite, the smell of diesel, the just the BO smell of soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get into the civilian world where there's colors and fragrances and so forth, and you get into banking, and there's a lot of women in banking, not men, and they don't ascribe to the same methods that you would handle a platoon.
Right.
So I ran afoul of some, like, you just don't say that or do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I started to learn more that it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Sure. Well, and I feel like that is the employee market in general, as it's kind of modernized. People are way more, concerned about the individual and their kind of how they're treated, and just I think it's changed even just in the workplace over the last probably 30 years. But yeah, I can imagine coming from not having to mind your P's and Q's to
Right.
that environment. So, but did anything translate?
No, not at that point. I mean,
No.
it took some time for me to see civilian leadership higher up in banking, and I was just trying to learn the trade, learn the nomenclature of banking, working in operations, and then installment loans, and then real estate loans, commercial loans, learning all the ins and outs about banking and understanding certain things. And things were changing pretty rapidly. And so I was looking for up in my elevator, so to speak, to advance in banking, because advancement was slow. And so in order to advance, you had to see opportunity at other banks, other independent banks, to move.
What type of banking did you focus on?
Well, I ended my career with small business administration lending. I was the chief credit officer there, and then I oversaw the SBA division of that bank, which included servicing, collections, fund control, as I call it, the south end of loans, making loans.
Mm-hmm.
But it took a while to get there. I mean, 34 years in banking.
Yeah.
But I did take a little detour, about 6 years, and I was hired away by a businessman who bought a distressed bank, and they had a lot of charge-offs, loans, bad loans, distressed assets, and he hired me for the specific reason to see if there was any money that could be collected from those loans.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got hired, and I got to work on that, and that was a different. Being on the south side of loans was something else. I think one of the questions that you sent me is how did you handle these debtors?
Yeah.
And because of my faith, before I picked up the phone and call a guy in Texas or call a guy wherever he is at, I prayed. I said, my phone call is going to change this guy's life, because I'm going to be the conversation at the kitchen table. Guess what? I got a call about this loan that was charged off 5 years ago, and now it's coming due. They want to collect money.
Mm-hmm.
So I always operated on the basis that human dignity, caring for the person on the other end of the phone. And I basically just said, look, I'm just starting. He said, I don't have the money. Well, I'm just starting to make a conversation with you. That's all I'm doing. I'm only asking that you pick up the phone when I call. And I said, and we can work together to see if there's a solution in here somewhere. And if you can do that, let's work together. And I had several people respond positively to that. And eventually, I had a couple of people call me back after the thing was resolved and said, thank you for calling me, because this has been on my mind for years. And now it's off. It's cleared.
Wow.
Yeah, so I took the tact of being very mindful that, but I was successful in recovering some assets for the bank. But then I went back to lending, and I enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. On the front side of it, you're probably seeing, though, a lot of the businesses that are hoping to get money. They're excited, and you have kind of the team that's in charge of the approval process, the underwriting process. Is that right?
Well, toward the end of my career, I was the authority that would make the decision.
The yay or nay.
But earlier in my career, I had to take those loan write-ups and send them up for approval to the loan committee. Yes, but at the end of my career, I was the guy.
Yeah.
But it took a while to get there, to have the understanding, the savvy to understand the ins and outs of people's finances, their ability to pay, et cetera. And what was your?
Well, just at what point do you get to a point where you're managing a team, a department,
right?
And I know, you kind of mentioned it with your early military experience. I feel like leadership kind of gravitated towards you, whether it was,
yes,
even in civilian life, if we were at a bonfire and you'd be the guy directing everybody to offload everything or whatever it may be. In all circumstances, it just seemed to kind of flock to you. And so you have this department that you're leading, and it seemed like people really, they had to come to you for the approvals, but it also seemed like there was a lot of that mentorship that you mentioned that you kind of poured into people in your department.
Well, I see what you're asking or saying here. And toward the end of my career, I really felt. Well, I think I mentioned to you that I went to Pacific Coast School of Banking, which is considered a graduate school of banking, back in 1986. And it was a 2-year course up at University of Washington. And you'd go there 2 weeks, take classes, study, get assigned, loaded up like a pack mule, go back down, do all your assignments, turn them in on a scheduled basis. And your last year, you'd have to write a thesis. And one of the things that really was grating on me at that time was such poor leadership that I saw in the high echelons of banking, whether it be in the credit department, whether it be in the operational system, or whether it be, the top down, the marketing department. I just felt that there was something very lacking. And so I wrote my thesis entitled "An Answer to Faulty Leadership in Banking." And I felt that being a faith-based man, taking my faith into the marketplace, biblical concepts, does it really work? Can it really work? And I started applying some of those principles, and I found that they did, in fact, work. So when it was my turn to get into senior management, I was able to implement some of those things and really see how they work with individuals. And I just sensed that. Well, I give you an example. I had one individual that was a direct report to me, and they didn't carry out my directive. And I was very direct of saying this has got to be done, and he didn't do it. So the next day, the individual comes in. I call him into my office, and he's expecting to really get spanked. Now, the old Greg Woolsey would have said, "Jump on him from a great height," right?
Right.
But I didn't do that. I just looked at him, silent, let him kind of stew a little bit. And then I looked at him and I said, called his name, and I said, you're better than this. I've seen you do better. And you really failed yourself in this instance. And I know that you are much better than this. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity to correct this and get this thing done that I tasked you with. And let's see if that works. Oh, and by the way, if you ever do that again, you're gone. So here's what I did. I looked at that and I confronted him. I kept short accounts. I didn't let it go or fester. And but it wasn't punitive.
Right. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. You're kind of developing a system based on some principles. So, and things that you saw that were lacking. So can you tell me about what are some of the top things that you saw that were lacking, and what are some of those principles that you started to lead from? Because what I hear you saying there is feedback, keeping short accounts.
Right. Well, I think it starts with, number one, worldview. So when I came to Christ, I my worldview was I had accountability to God. And so I'd go through Scripture and I'd read about it. He said, whatever you do your work heartily as unto the Lord and rather than to men, knowing that you will receive the reward of the inheritance because you work for the Lord. So I would see my bosses or those people over me, not my bosses. My boss was God.
Mm-hmm.
So when I stayed till 7 p.m., I didn't stay for 7 p.m. for those bosses. I stayed it for my God. So in like manner, when I became the senior manager, I had these people under me. And matter of fact, Scripture further goes on. It says, hey, you guys who are now masters or bosses, deal with your subordinates and your direct reports justly and fairly, and knowing that you have a master in heaven. So my treatment of them was being looked upon by God. So it's the golden rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated yourself and respected. Mm-hmm. So I guess I valued the individual, their intrinsic value, rather than just their utility and what I could get out of them. Mm-hmm. And that relieved a lot of pressure from me because I know I was pleasing the one the audience of one. Mm-hmm. And so that was really, that's where it really built the foundation of my whole work experience. My own personal work experience and my leadership style.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was the confrontational style or keeping short accounts. It was for restoration. I wanted to restore that individual to what they can be. Mm-hmm. And I think some of them got it.
Right.
They could trust me because I had their best interest at mind. So all the while trying to accomplish your goal, because you still have to accomplish tasks and goals and so forth. There's still the heat of the moment. I really emphasize communication, civility. I emphasize no blame. Always looking forward.
Solutions.
Solutions. I told people, look, you come in here, we have a problem. I don't have any rearview mirror. We're looking out the windshield. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to move forward together. And I don't want to go down memory lane. That's a waste of time. And so I think that worked fairly well. Mm-hmm. And we got solutions, and we moved forward. So, but that was all faith-driven. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of leaders, and that's the other thing, is they try to, that's the other thing about leaders. I want to share this with you about communication, is some leaders make their communications or their directives vague on purpose. So they give their subordinates a mission to execute, and they make it on purpose vague. So the subordinate then has to define their vagueness. And when that task is done and it's not done rightly, the subordinate gets the blame, because the manager then says, "Well, you didn't understand me, or it's all your fault." And so I saw that in many cases where the senior management didn't explicitly state concisely what the mission was and how they would accomplish it. On purpose. So they wouldn't get the blame.
That's interesting. It's funny you say that because I was reading something just last week that was talking about the importance of, the guy calls it DOD, definition of done. If you don't give what done looks like, how do you know when it's done? He said, and so he said a good leader is going to give a definition of done.
Right.
Here's what it's going to look like. Here's what it's going to feel like. Here's what it's, whatever. It's like, and there's no guessing did I do it? Because done's already been defined.
Right.
And that's so interesting to hear you say leadership was intentionally being vague. I mean, that sounds like a horrible management or leadership style.
Well, it's to avoid accountability. You and I have talked about in the past that obviously management, the definition, the standard definition of management is getting things done through other people. And you and I've always talked about that. Yeah, to do that, you have to delegate. You have to delegate authority, but you never delegate responsibility. It's always yours.
Yeah.
And I think those leaders that are vague in their directives, they can avoid responsibility by blaming the subordinate because they didn't accomplish the task.
Well, in some cases, I feel like they don't even know what done looks like.
That may be.
They're just, speaking the loudest in the room and hoping somebody else, is intimidated by it and goes and does it and can figure it out for them. And then when it comes back, it's almost like they don't even know until, it doesn't work or whatever. They don't even know if it's right or not. They're just, and then if it fails, whatever it is, they don't have to shoulder the blame like you're saying.
Well, if you look at the secular point of view, and before my faith, I held this as well, and that is, just get it done, and if it doesn't work, blame somebody else, and it's not my fault, and then move on and look at people, whereas they're expendable.
Mm-hmm.
Where a faith-based leader would say, no, maybe they failed, and I take responsibility for that. Maybe I didn't instruct them or mentor them. Now, there are some cases where there are people that are just like, okay, you're in the wrong vocation.
Yeah. Well, there's I think he's an ex-SEAL that talks about leadership all the time, Jocko Willington. And he has a book, Extreme Ownership. And in that, basically, everything's your fault. Everything is the leader's fault. Even if the guy's in the wrong position,
Right.
wrong vocation. Well, guess who hired him? Or guess who continued
Right.
to employ him?
Yes.
Guess who didn't fire him?
Right.
And so at the end of the day, I think that's, management, leadership, it's ultimately about responsibility, taking full and complete responsibility.
Right.
Ownership. Yeah, it's pretty interesting that it's pretty extreme. Extreme ownership. It literally is everything's your fault.
Well,
In a positive way. It's supposed to be a healthy thing. He also has something, the dichotomy of leadership or something, where the flip side of it.
well, and don't forget the secular view of leadership is self promotion,
Yeah.
and it's me, and it's not. Oh, and I get the credit. See, if a faith-based leader says it doesn't matter who gets the credit, and he would be a cheerleader for those people that accomplish the task. I'll tell you what, you get a leader like that, and you've got subordinates that will go to the mat for that person.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it is. When a good leader,
Yeah.
people will want to rally around.
Absolutely.
They want.
Absolutely.
You got to be somebody that people want to actually follow.
Yes.
So
Matter of fact, the definition of leadership is turn around. If anybody's following you, then you're a leader.
right.
Right?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I know you talk a lot about your faith being, how you've shaped your leadership style, where you led from. Was there ever a time in business that it was tested where you kind of went, oh man, I'm up against, what do I, this isn't an alignment with how I want to lead right now?
Well, I call those ethical dilemmas or you could fall prey to what they call situational ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a temptation to slide that way to avoid the bullets.
Right.
And so and this hits everybody, the secular guy, the faith-based guy. I think what happens with the faith-based guy, he has to be grounded and go back and go, okay, my accountability is to God. What's the right thing to do? Not the convenient thing. What's the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
And it may be that you take a hit.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a loss in the score column. It may be the consequences you may suffer. But in the long run, it's better to have that rather than on your conscience. So those do crop up, and it's very tempting to take the easy way out.
Right.
But the hard way is to man up and confess and say, I did it, or, it's on my watch, it's on me. And I think you'll garner more respect from your subordinates and also your superiors, because then they go, well, there's a guy you can trust.
Right. Yeah, that's huge. So did you face that at times?
Yeah, at times. And I obviously wrestled with it, but I think I landed on the right decisions at the time, and I'm glad I did it in retrospect. So,
well, in the banking community, I mean, reputation's huge. It seems like you end up working with or for another bank,
right?
And that type of stuff follows you. People know that leader, that manager, that just, he threw his team under the bus, or, it's kind of the whole lead by example. When your people are watching and you're like, no, this is on me. I think it gets your people to trust you too. And a little bit of it for me is also trusting myself. Can I trust my instincts and my character, that when your back is up against the wall, I am the type of leader that is not going to take the easy way out.
Right.
And we do that a lot with our projects. If something goes wrong and it's like, an error of some sort, rather than make excuses and sit there and point fingers, and
right.
It's something we go, okay.
That's when you say point fingers, that's one thing I never wanted my staff to do. When they started pointing fingers, I said, no, that's not who we are. That's not what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, I had a senior manager who replaced my other manager. He came down. He was in a different state, and he flew down, had a meeting with me. He was very gung-ho, attorney by trade or by training. And we were talking about some kind of issues, whether it was personnel or credit issues. And he mentioned something like, well, we got to fight this. I love a good fight. I turned to him and I said, oh my goodness. I said, that's the last thing I want to do. I said, that's not me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring civility. I want to bring reconciliation. I want to bring conciliation. And I want to have people work together. I do not want conflict. That's the other thing about bad management, is that they think rivalry, strife, and envy is good. It makes people work harder, and the answer is no, it does not. It just creates bad blood and all that sort of thing. No, you can be competitive without being having strife, and so that's what I wanted to do when I got my chance to be a senior leader, is to take the fire out of the fire pit, and dampen everything down. And I to a great degree, I think I was able to do that.
So sounds like you're kind of more of a, I mean, what kind of leadership style? There's lead by directive and lead by threat or kind of like strength or whatever, and that tends to be more of that punitive style,
Right.
or there's
It's intimidation
yeah.
or threats or
What kind of style would you say you kind of incorporated? I hear a lot of people talk about leading by committee, but then that leaves too many. Everybody's the boss,
no, then yeah, the blame gets spread around that way.
Yeah.
No, I think well, let's put it this way. I was demanding,
Mm-hmm.
but I was fair. I didn't have favorites. I kept aloof, but not too much. I would walk around and look at somebody and catch them doing something right and praise them. I would try to edify when I could, but not flatter. It was not flattery. It was, catch somebody that really did a good job and say, hey, and make them know that, and make them know that they did a great job. But I was, and I had an open door policy, but I demanded respect and I respected them back.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't a pushover per se. I would say that I had a listening ear. Some people wanted to talk a lot more, and I would kind of say, hold up, if you don't mind, let me pull the questions out of what I need to do to make a decision here. Mm. But what I wanted to do is also help them understand the process of how to solve this. And we would solve it together. And so that's the other thing is when you give people ownership of a solution,
yeah,
man, they just take off like gusto.
Yeah, I noticed that for me. I didn't know I was doing this, but I was always sliding in, and it wasn't that I wanted to be the hero, but it was so easy for me to solve the problem.
Right.
I could see it. I had a lot of experience with it, and being removed from the problem, sometimes you can see it more easily. And so I would come in and I would solve it. And what I realized is I slowly created a culture that people became dependent on me to solve the problem. So they'd always just, when they'd hit a problem, they'd stop trying and just bring it to me. And at first, it made me feel important and good. Yeah. And like, hey, I'm the problem solver. And then I realized, it took me a while, but I realized this pattern of I just broke the system where they no longer feel equipped to solve their own problems. And so when I stopped doing it, it was amazing to see not only did they get really good at solving these problems and really quickly and on the lowest level that they could solve it, and they didn't have to escalate it, right? People, right. But they had some ownership. They were proud of it and they were excited about it. You're kind of robbing people of the opportunity to grow when you do that. And as a leader, you need to be able to assess that and see that and go a little more slowly instead of swooping in and solving everything.
Right. No, it really is to get people to participate in the solution and take ownership, and then you're coaching them up. Mm-hmm. And you're giving them the ability next time around is to get a little closer to not coming into your office.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that makes them feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. Equipping people and that idea of solving the problem on the lowest level it can be solved is huge.
Right.
Because then all of a sudden, as the senior manager or CEO, and you're solving, low-level problems because everybody kind of has done that where they kind of keel over and defer, and part of that too is like you don't want people to be afraid to make a mistake. So I think creating an environment that's safe to make a mistake, not
Right.
detrimental to the point where, it's going to hurt.
Right. That you're not going to get yelled at or jumped on from a great height and all that.
Right.
Yeah. So you're right. You create and really that's part of the team because they know that you've got their back, even though they messed up.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to fight for them. You
Yeah.
know, and that's huge.
Yeah.
It really is, because that's kind of what you wanted as a subordinate.
True.
As you're coming up, you didn't want somebody to slam you.
Right.
And that's that golden rule again. Treat others as you would have them treat you. And so it seems to be simple. It's hard to, I don't know, it's in real life, there's all kinds of dynamics that happen, like you were talking about, the dilemmas, the ethical situations, the things that you could go this, or it's on the bubble. But then you have to really go back and say, well, what's the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah,
And-
you got to know what scale you're using to measure that too. And that goes back to,
Well, okay, so one of the things I was thinking about in your questions that you sent me about communication, I think one of the things that I truly believe that probably one of the biggest problems in the entire world is lack of honest communication. I don't mean information. We hear misinformation and malinformation. I'm not talking about information. I'm talking about communicating. And to speak the truth, and clear and concise, not disguised. And when you do that, and then maybe you have someone repeat it back to you to make sure, and I do this as well. If someone is communicating to me, I'll go and summarize. In summary, let me summarize what I think I heard you say.
that's so huge. I remember actually, because I've learned so much about leadership growing up, being raised by you. And, I remember you saying communication isn't just simply talking at somebody. They have to actually understand what you're telling them.
Right.
Otherwise, you didn't communicate it.
So I talk about, you have the transmitter and you have the receiver, right? And the transmitter is communicating to the receiver. Now, if the receiver gets it and they do this thing and they come back and the transmitter says, no, that's not what I said. They go, well, it's the fault of the transmitter because they didn't communicate concisely and to make this person understand. You're supposed to actually communicate to a person gets it.
Yeah.
They actually get it. And that's why sometimes having somebody repeat back what you thought, what you said.
Yeah.
And then do it in writing.
Do it. Yeah. Get it backed up in writing.
Right.
So going back to your point on, you think the biggest problem in the world really is communication and clear, honest, concise communication.
Right.
Why do you think there's a breakdown in what is it? Fear that, or just protecting people's feelings? Where's the lack of clarity?
I said initially in my example that it's the fault of the transmitter, but the receiver has some skin in the game as well. They can choose to hear what they want to hear, and then filter out all the other stuff they don't want to hear. And that's why you have them repeat and write down and agree what they heard was correct. Because then you'll eliminate that part of the deal.
Yeah, that's like a system of communication. Almost to the point where, because every time you have a failure or a lapse, a gap in communication, it's like you think you checked every box. Okay, I told you clearly, you repeated back, then you went and did something that we didn't talk about. And it's like, well, you didn't take notes. Okay, well, then we got it in writing. We both review it. We agree. and then you took twice as long to do it. Well, we didn't talk time for it. There's always
Yes,
there's these
that's right.
tweaking,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So what it sounds like you're talking about is creating a system that squeezes all of those other things out.
Correct.
It's kind of like in the military. I mean, you didn't have room for communication errors over the radio.
No, did not.
So how did you squeeze those errors out? You had code words, or you didn't want to have somebody mishear a letter, so you.
Well, it was life and death too. So
Yeah. I mean, you're getting orders to fire over your troops' heads.
right.
Somebody screws that up, it's over.
Well, we had double check systems, and we had double and triple check systems. We really prided ourselves. Well, first of all, when you got a fire mission, you knew our troops were in dire need of support right now, and we wanted to deliver ordnance on target as soon as we could, and defeat the enemy and save our people. And so we were all committed to that as a team. It was just amazing how it worked. And you would do training and training and training before the actual fire mission would happen. I would do training exercises at night when I would make up various exercises, various batteries, and we would train the guys that are on the charts, on the maps, that did the slide rules, all that stuff. We really had first round accuracy right away if the forward observer's coordinates were correct.
Yeah.
But getting back to communication.
Well,
I'm sorry.
You said something right there that was so key. You were strongly unified around a vision,
Yes.
a mission.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
In this case, there couldn't be a better mission. Save your people.
Right.
Defeat the enemy, save your people.
Right.
Protect their lives.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think so often leaders in business, they don't have such a, I guess, a polarizing or, such a clear-cut mission. That I think so many people lack that. And I feel like I see a lot of teams and projects and things fail when the mission isn't clear. I always ask our team when we have a problem, I go, what's the goal? Mm-hmm. If we don't know the goal, how do we know how to solve the problem?
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is you got to get buy-in from people. They might not have the same, like, for example, people that maybe not have faith like you have, they're not on the same page you are, but nevertheless, they're a human being. I'm sure they have some pride in what they do. Mm-hmm. And you hired them to be in that particular slot because they were supposed to be good at what they do.
Right.
So they have to take some pride in the ownership that they have this skill that you're counting upon. And maybe it's one of those things where only they can do it. Mm-hmm. And it has to be impressed upon them how important they are to this job. So how you motivate them internally, or, they might be having some personal problems at home. They might be having some health problems. But you say, look, I'm here to help you. What do you need to get this done? How can I help you be successful? Mm-hmm. And boy, that would alleviate a lot of issues.
What I hear you describing is a servant-style leadership.
Yes. Matter of fact, so I told you that the standard definition of management is getting things done through other people. Well, I took it a little step further, but a different direction. I say that management, and I use management and leadership interchangeably, that management is the process of caring for the individual to help them achieve their potential while they're accomplishing their tasks. So they have a task, and they have potential, and maybe they're not living up to it. But you're caring for that individual so much that you're going to mentor them, you're going to train them, you're going to coach them up, you're going to edify them, you're going to correct them, you're going to do whatever it is about restoration, it's about lifting up, it's about, and helping them to be able to help the mission, and which is to accomplish that task, whatever is in front of them.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a real good definition for me in my faith-based management. And again, it's not ego-driven, it's not narcissistic, it's not any of these things. Hey, look at me. It's mission, the personnel, the people, and you last.
Yeah, it's not weak either. It's
No, it's not weak.
yeah.
There's accountability too. I mean, you hold them responsible. You give them deadlines, and if the deadline is not met, there's consequences because you have to suffer consequences. But again, it's not like you're going to put it to them. You're going to say, look, I need to pull you because we need to accomplish this thing. This is really important. I mean, in the military, if I had a person that wasn't doing their job in the fire direction center and not doing the calculations correctly, or if I had a forward observer that was not know where he was and called in the wrong coordinates, I'd yank him.
It's probably without a second thought.
Oh, yeah, because lives are in danger.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying in business lives are in danger, but in a sense, you're saying, look, we're running a business, we're profitability, we have customers to serve, we have reputation to serve, et cetera.
But it is the life and death of the team or the project, or in a lot of cases, even the business.
Yes,
I mean,
correct.
businesses fail all the time.
Right.
And I mean, there's a myriad of reasons, but I mean, I'm sure you saw, especially in the SBA, like you would see the businesses that would succeed and the businesses that would fail.
Right.
And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons that you saw, but what did you see in the successful ones, and what did you see in the ones that would fail?
Well, those are good questions. I would have to say, and there's probably people out there that would disagree with me, but I think most business failures are due to a large part of being undercapitalized at the beginning. And they feel that sales growth would pull them out of the descent. They get to an altitude and then they're starting to kind of auger in. And sales doesn't pull them out because that takes more cash. And the more cash you need is more capital. I think the mistake a lot of people look at is they look at banks to provide capital. Banks do not. Banks provide, there's a term called working capital, so they provide gap financing between collection of your receivables and the money outlaid for those payables.
Sure.
Okay, to pay for that product or service. The other thing that banks provide is long-term financing of an asset, like a building or cars or equipment. So banks provide a great service, but if it's not utilized correctly, it can be dangerous to a company. And I think what happens is a company will get a line of credit, and instead of having it revolve as the receivables and payables start doing their thing and taking care of that gap, they take it all the way up, and it gets stuck. Like we used to call that evergreen loans, and it's now useless as far as gap financing because it's already taken up. So I think it's because they think that they don't understand that equity is not demanding. Equity meaning people that invest in the company, yourself, your family, somebody else. It's not demanding money. It's patient money. Whereas bank financing is not patient. They demand every month a payment, principal and interest or whatever it is. And so I think a lot of people don't think this through. And there's a lot of machinations, as you know, as a business owner. There's just a lot of moving parts that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
And their expertise might be like a backhoe operator. I do the best backhoe trenches in San Diego County. You know, hire me. But doesn't understand the nuances of all these things. Like he'll be liberal in his accounts receivable policy. His payable term might be he has to pay every 30 days or less, but his receivable term might be 60 to 90 days. So he's got a huge gap. Unless he's been capitalized well and can and carry that load, he becomes, in actuality, to that clients that he's serving, he's banking them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he becomes a financial institution.
And he's not supposed to be. He's supposed to be a backhoe operator.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hear you saying a couple things. One, I would agree, and I think the research agrees with you that I was reading somewhere that a study was done that 80% of businesses that fail state cash flow, capitalization as the primary reason.
Well, let me actually dive in a little more into that. So capitalization is number one. Number two is so what they should be really focused on is margins.
Mm-hmm.
Because they want to focus on, well, gee, we were 500,000 in sales last year. This year we're going to be $1 million, and then next year we're going to be $2 million. I go, okay, well, sales takes cash, which is capital. So where are you going to get that? Well, you get it either through your profit or an injection of equity. But if you do debt financing, now you're starting to get into trouble. So the other thing is that what they need to focus on is margins. Their margin might be 2%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a heck of a way to run a business. You should be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore the business can accumulate cash and can actually pay its way as it goes. But what happens is, and I've seen it with companies, this is like 25 years ago, I saw a construction company had a great reputation. It came to me for financing, and I looked at their financial statement, and I think they had $25 million in sales. They had 35 employees. They were well known in the community. But I looked down, and they only made 1.5% net income. I went, wait a minute. So I dug into the thing, and I got the owner of the company. I said, look, I showed him. I said, look, I showed you that you can trim your staff. You'll lower your sales to about 15 million, but I can get you up to 10%. Net NOI, net operating income. And he looked at that and he goes, no.
Man.
Now, is that company in business today? No, they're not. And so I think you really got to watch your margins. You got to, and then the cash flow. That's the other thing. You really got to watch your receivables and your payables. You've got to watch that. The velocity of money is huge, and your cash flow is very, very important. It's the lifeblood of the company.
Yeah.
And so your capitalization initially, your gap financing initially, those things are going to carry you. But I'll tell you what, if you're going to expand, you're going to need some equity financing.
But when you say equity, you mean like actually owner infused, not debt.
When I say equity, I mean people that invest. I'm not talking about stockholders. I guess it could be, depending on how your company's configured. But you've got to have more ingestion of cash into the company that's not debt.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be family money. It could be from the company, the net operating income, or it could be from an injection of cash
Yeah.
that doesn't have requirements on it.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, though, is everybody points to the cash flow, right? And I go, but what I hear is strategic mistakes. And that comes from leadership. It comes from the leader of the business not knowing the vision and understanding how to get there. He doesn't have a clear map.
Right.
And so it just sounds to me like, yeah, we're going to blame it on money, but a lot of businesses go half-cocked. I mean, to your point, the operator turned business owner. It's like, hey, I'm a really good operator. May as well run a business. And it's like, well, those are two different things.
Well, if I may, just step back again to management and leadership for a second. So in the banking world, it used to be where a loan officer was really good at what they were doing. They did a great job of lending, got their clients financing when they needed. Back in the banking world, the loan officer also was responsible for rainmaking, going and finding clients and so forth. So real good loan officers and so forth are really, good to have in your organization as a bank. But what happens is the tendency is to promote those guys into management. Well, they're production people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to manage. And so what happens is they lean back on their skill of production and they ignore the management of their staff around them. So they're just focusing on them and they miss the fact. So some people are, I wouldn't say pigeonholed, but they like their particular position. Mm-hmm. And they're not looking for upward mobility. They're looking for expanding their paycheck. And the more loans they make and so forth and so on, the bonuses they get. But if you promote some of those people to management, they don't know what the heck they're doing because they have a production mentality.
Right.
And I thought, maybe upward is not always the right thing for people. Just like you've got maybe a framer. And you go, shoot, I'd like to get him to be a project manager. Well, would he be? Maybe he's the best framer in the world.
Right.
That's what he likes to do. But could he manage?
Well, that's the thing about leadership is understanding people. I think that's a key attribute. And that's where that servant mentality, I don't think it means you have all the answers. I think it means you know what you're good at and you know what you're not good at.
Well, I think you described that as you have to be humble. Mm-hmm. You can't be a know-it-all.
Right.
You have to be open to listen to others.
Yeah. So is there some of this stuff that you wish you had in your back pocket a little younger?
Oh, gosh. I was so immature and so looking back, I think if I was, I'd be a better listener. I'd be more patient. I would. I'd be less competitive with my peers. So, but that comes with age and experience, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that kind of I'm looking at with age and experience. Right now I'm at a point where I'm like, oh yeah, a lot of the stuff I'm learning and really embracing, I've been told by you or somebody, a mentor, somebody at some point and you just kind of poo-poo it. You're like, you probably don't know what you're talking about. And then there comes a point where it becomes real through personal experience. And then you go, okay, this is why you need to tap into people that have been there. you need to sit down with somebody and say, I haven't led teams before. I don't know what I'm doing, or I've led small teams and now I'm leading bigger teams or more complex projects. And I think that's what's kind of fun about these types of conversations is I feel more open to learning now because I don't want to make those mistakes, and I'd like to advance by learning from somebody else.
Yeah, well, basically that's part of humility is you say, I don't know everything, and I'm willing to learn
Yeah.
rather than being a know-it-all. And I think that's the beauty of it. I getting back to this faith-based issue is that I would have hated to see myself now if I didn't have faith. I'd be insufferable.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's just I'd be hardcore and would be maybe argumentative. I'd be not as malleable or prone to listen.
So what about those people that, kind of the American version of a tough guy being out there, a mover and a shaker, a get stuff done?
I feel sorry for them.
Really?
Yeah. Because they're going to run into a brick wall. They're going to run into something that's too big for them. They can't handle. And I wouldn't say it would destroy them, but they'd take a big hit. And, that could be the thing that brings them to faith. Who knows? No, I just, I thought it was interesting. I used to go to these men's retreats that were attended by attorneys, judges, mortgage bankers. I had a Coldwell banker. And it was Christian retreats. And it wasn't from the pulpit. It was just the rubber meets the road. And a lot of things they talked about is why work? It's your platform for ministry. Your life is your ministry. It just depends on how God wants to fund it. Talks about, being servant of others. And here you had all these people that are competitors. They're competition, And it really got my attention because I thought, how do you live out biblical principles in the marketplace?
Yeah.
Do they work? And the answer resoundingly is I can say, yes, they do. And I think it works mostly because it affects you. Like, for example, when I was an employee, I was kind of complaining and, shucks this. And I ran into this thing in Philippians. It says, do all things without complaining and disputing. And I looked at that and I go, really? He goes, yeah, to prove yourselves a light to the world. What are you doing complaining? And then there was something else that I ran into. And, I ran into unrealistic, cruel bosses. And in 1 Peter it says, submit yourselves to authorities and those who are over you, and with all respect, and do what they tell you to do, not only to those who are good and gentle, but to also those who are cruel and unreasonable. And I went, what? And I had a few of those bosses. And then it went on to say, it says, for this finds favor with God, if a man bears up under sufferings when suffering unjustly. Now, if you did what was wrong, and you bear up under it, that's no credit to you. But if you do what's right and bear and suffer for it, and bear up under it, that finds favor with God. And boy, that really just turned me to look at these unreasonable south end of northbound mooses that were my bosses at the time. And it just changed my attitude. So that biblical piece changed me, and I became a valuable asset to this guy who was a brute.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but anyway, I tucked that into my learning queue. And when I became a senior manager, I remembered that.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, it helped me temper myself and my response and my behavior throughout my career. And even handling, like I said, debtors, calling them up and giving them respect and dignity. Now, I must say, too, as a leader, you never dress down somebody in front of their peers. You do that behind closed doors. Let me give you an example. I had a senior manager, and I was a manager, and I happened to be in my office, and I was with two of my direct reports. And this senior manager, came down and opened the door and just dressed me down for something and then left. Now, my direct reports looked at me and they were in shock. They felt embarrassed for me. They felt for me. And I said, that was wrong. I owe it to this manager to tell him what he did was wrong. So I went up. He was on a floor above me. I went up to his floor and I went into his office, closed the door. And he was ready for a fight. And I said to him, that person that went down in my office was not the guy I was used to having as a boss. You're better than that. But you do not have the right to take away my dignity in front of my subordinates. And what you did was egregious, was wrong. And I did it in a way respectful. And at the end, he saw his wrong and he apologized. But I said, again, it's restorative. I wanted to restore the relationship of boss and me, the servant, right? But I wanted to say, you didn't do your bossship right.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to call him on that. And I did say, look, you have a right to call me to your office and dress me down behind closed doors. You have absolutely the right to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But you don't do it in front of my subordinates.
Yeah. It's interesting. I prioritize feedback on my team. There's this idea that feedback, it takes courage to give people feedback. So feedback's a gift. If you don't get feedback, how do you ever grow or change or learn? But I think up until this point, I've kind of always viewed it as downstream only. That's interesting, that story. I mean, I would appreciate the feedback as a boss if I did something that's not working for...
Oh, so you're talking about the upstream aspect.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you haven't made those egregious errors.
I doubt it. I mean, I would say there's a potential that either I haven't communicated that it's welcomed, or there's a perception that it's not, or something.
By the way, I must say that this boss that I corrected, he was a great boss. I really loved the guy and really respected him. But I felt that I owed it to him to tell him that he erred in this way.
Well,
and that
it takes guts. That's what I'm saying. I mean, that's a gift to him, and I bet you he grew as a leader from it.
I hope so. Yeah.
I can almost guarantee
and
it.
I did say, I said, look, man, you took away my dignity in front of my people, and that's not your right to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a funny thing out there. It's complicated. I think the other thing being faith-based, I was always prayed before work. I prayed during work sometimes. There's some real complicated situations. There'd be some phone calls that I'd have to make, and I go, God, this is going to be a hard call. Just help me. Give me the words. Now, back on communication for a second, I'll tell you, email, there's a lot, people will write emails, and there's a lot missing in those emails. People can misconstrue things, especially the tone. Like you go, oh, gee, am I being read out here? And then you call them and go, everything's fine. You go, oh, okay. So I remember some of my direct reports. Since I was in credit, I would, we'd always get the sales force and the credit. There were always the brake and the accelerator, there was always friction there. And so when there was a complaint as to maybe a loan not getting approved or getting handled quickly enough, I would always get CC'd on these emails as a senior manager or senior credit guy. And I would get a ton of these. So I called my directs in. I said, hey, look, you get one or two of these or three emails. That's too many. You should pick up the phone, call them, and get it squared away. Well, they didn't do that. So on this one particular case, I got 2 emails on the same issue. So I picked up the phone, called the direct. He comes in my office. I said, what's this guy's number? So I get him on the polycom. I get him on the comm. I said, who else is involved in this? Well, the BDO over here. Okay, we'll get him on. So we get everybody on the call. I said, okay, what's the issue? So here's the issue. Okay, well, and then start mapping out a solution. All of us working together, no emails, on the phone. And within 5 minutes, we had a solution. Who was going to do what? What's the deadline? What's the follow-up? And everybody had a game plan. It was like in the huddle, ready, break. And then you go and you move the ball down the field. And I said, so then I turned to my director. I said, that's what I want you to do. And I had to do that with each one of my directs to show them how to communicate. And by the way, again, everybody was doing the finger point. I said, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
We're doing the solution. We're not going back. We're not going memory lane. And so it was, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was like, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to make this loan. We're trying to help this guy buy this building. This is where we're trying to accomplish. So that we're going to do it. And what do we need to accomplish it? And so I think when you start helping people understand, I guess it's a way of thinking that they had so much going on, they didn't really think that process that way.
Yeah, it's crazy to me how many things float. They just they don't reconcile. They're just going round and round and round. And then if you get all the players in one room, this is that communication thing. This is the clarity of it.
Right.
It's kind of like I've even found that people in that meeting, they didn't even have all the pieces of information. It's like, let's turn all the lights on,
right?
Get everybody in the same room.
Right.
The finger pointing has to stop because when you triangulate the communication, it's really easy for them to say, well, they said they were gonna, and then you go over there and then, hey, they said you were gonna.
Yeah.
No, I didn't say that, and it's just like, doggone it.
Yeah.
Get everybody in the same room.
Yes.
And it just comes back over and over and over to communication.
Yes.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And
so as leaders, really, that's one of your primary jobs is to communicate.
Yeah, and if you boil down communication, I wrote down a couple of things for this, just off the top of my head. There's different types of communication, like there's informational It's kind of an FYI. Okay, it's going to rain tomorrow. That's informational.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is instructional. Okay, this is how you do it. This is how you put the baseboard on the. Okay, that's instructional. The next one is directional, which is directives. We are going to build an ADU right here, and the trucks are going to be here. So I want you to unload the things. You're going to have to do this and do this, and so so it's action.
Yeah.
It's actional, and then there's correctional. In other words, that's where you, again, you're confrontational. You keep short accounts, but you're not adversarial. You're not adversarial in the sense of I'm going to punish you. You're my enemy. Confrontational is I'm going to help you up. I'm going to help you build up. So when you look at communication that way, you kind of have a better sense of where you're going with it.
Yeah. Knowing what type of communication you're
Yeah.
engaging in.
Right.
I know what it means because I grew up with you saying it all the time, and I'm sure it's obvious to a lot of people. But when you say keep short accounts,
don't let things fester. Like let's say you catch someone do something wrong or something was incorrect or whatever, and you think about it and you go, well, you kind of examine yourself. Was that part of my problem or their problem? And you think about it and you go, well, no, I think that's on them. So you don't wait till the afternoon. You don't wait till the next morning. Well, maybe you do, just think through what you're going to say. But you don't let it fester, because you let it go for 2 days, 3 days, a week.
or even until the next time it happens.
Right.
You know,
Next time. Then what happens is, I didn't do that. Or why didn't you call me on that when it happened? Or I wasn't aware, whatever. So no, keep short accounts, because then it's off your plate, onto them. You do it, again, respectfully, to restore them. I mean, again, and by the way, again, I say you're always doing it for them, so they can get better.
Yeah.
You know what I
That's
mean?
what the feedback is. That's what the
Yeah.
constructive criticism. I think you hear that all the time, and I feel like it gets lost sometimes because.
So again, it's getting back to my introduction from the Army to the banking world. It's not what you say; it's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you become a little bit more adept at couching things.
Yeah.
Not in double speak. You're speaking plainly, but you get your point across. And you don't come across as weak. I think they respect that. People respect that. And you would too. If you were doing something and nobody called you on it, you'd want to know, because you want to be better. You want to do better.
Well, yeah, and if you have somebody on your team or a leader that doesn't want to hear that, then maybe they're in the wrong position and part of the wrong team.
Right.
And you don't want people that can't take the feedback or give it in a way that is meant to better the team. I think that's, when it comes down to whatever you're doing in life, it's like if the goal or the mission gets lost and it starts to become about self-preservation or, moving up, that's the whole idea of, hey, if I do this at any cost, I'm going to look good, I'm going to get this promotion, or I'll get the accolades, and it's like, I think you were saying it earlier, it's not sustainable. You're going to hit a wall at some point. At some point, those people pay for that style of advancement, of leadership.
They do.
And,
Well, when the other thing is, when you become a good leader, you build loyalty. You build a kind of a love between a respect and a love that you build a bond.
yeah,
And you can go different places, different work thing, but you go, yeah, I remember him, and and I don't know, That's the thing is we're all tied to each other. We affect each other one way or the other, negative or positive.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of an individual, you want to think of them positively,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
So, I mean, getting to be in these different areas of leadership at different seasons of your life, what do you look back on, and what are you most proud of?
well, that was a question you gave me, and I thought a lot about it. And there's two things that I'm proud of. Um, the first, well, not necessarily in this order, but I guess number one would be that I was true to my Lord, my faith, and to the best of my ability to walk in faith in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure I failed many times, but one of the big things about faith is there's forgiveness. And so I feel really proud about that I was able to build a team. We were successful. And I think the people learned and were mentored, I hope, by me. And and we had a good team.
Yeah.
And so I'm really proud of that, and that we were successful. We had good results. And the second thing I'm really proud of is that I was able to raise a family and sustain a family, and the balance
Mm-hmm.
between work and family.
Mm-hmm.
And my children, my grandchildren, 57 years of marriage is a testament to that I'm really proud of, that we were able to go through all those years, the high overhead years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other form of leadership we didn't even touch on, but I mean, leadership's a big topic, and you can lead, you don't have to own a business or head up a big department of a major bank. And,
Right.
I mean, you could be leading your family. You know, I mean, even young people, we talk about you're leading in your social circle at school, you know, on your sports team, whatever it may be. And I mean, so that's a good point of just being able to, I mean, you've led a lot of different fronts in your life. And I think, you know, that's why I was excited to have this conversation with you. I mean, it's in learning from people's experience, looking at, you know, the wisdom that gets passed down, the stories that you get to share. And if, you know, people can kind of just brush it off and go, oh yeah, you know, but if you really listen to somebody who's been there, done that,
Right.
you can take a lot away from that.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm an amalgamation of many people inputting their lives into my life
Yes.
over the years.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's things that you keep. There's some things you throw away with other individuals. But we're all bits and pieces of all the people that we've met and been around with. And they made it into this personality, this person, same with you. And that's really, really kind of neat because it becomes yours
Yeah.
and your distinct personality.
Yeah.
And so it's framed a little bit different than maybe how you caught it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just got that flavor, your stamp on it.
Yeah. Well, I use a lot of your dadisms in my business. People don't even realize it, but I probably sound like a mini Greg or something, because I can hear it from the stories I remember you sharing, you know, in your time in collections or in your time in the SBA, or, you know, even the early stages of launching the opening of that Wells Fargo branch. And I just remember these little bits, and I can hear them come out through, because, you know, I'm leading a team, and we've got a great team. It's never perfect, and we're always trying to improve. And I know that starts with me. And if I'm not working on myself, we did a episode last week on with my business coach about your capacity to deal with more complexity and more intensity, and how that affects your ability to lead too, and leading from a healthy place, and that has so much to do with faith too. And where does your direction come from?
Right.
Where does who holds you accountable? If you're at the top, who holds you accountable? Well, we always have our Creator holding us accountable, and
Right.
we have to answer to Him.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. You mentioned that when I was kind of on top of the heap in the organizational chart,
Mm-hmm.
and people would just look at that, not look at the faith, but just look at that, and they think, oh, well, you got nobody above you or whatever. And I go, well, even my boss has the shareholders above him.
Mm-hmm.
There's always, whether you're president, or whatever, you have people above him.
Yeah.
And I go, you're always a subordinate.
Mm.
You're always a subordinate.
Mm-hmm.
And but in our case, people of faith, we have God who's for us and has the best in mind for us, and wants to grow us and change us and affect other people and show His love to other people through us.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's while we are earning a living.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically your life is your ministry. It just depends on how God wants to fund it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I enjoy the conversation. I love the topic of leadership because I feel like it's never ending and you can always be working on it. Even in retirement, there's still opportunities to lead, and connecting with friends, family, groups where, you're still pouring into people. And I just think we're never done developing.
Right.
We're lifelong learners, always curious. And
Amen.
fun conversation, and just really appreciate you coming in today and talking
It's been
through
my
it.
pleasure. It's been great.
Awesome.
Thanks, son.
Thank
Really
you.
Appreciate it.
Well, that's our time for today's episode of Building Up. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And until next time, keep building up.